Hey everybody, it's Drew from 198 Methods. We just want to record a quick video to go with this long post about possible election outcomes. I'm recording this on Monday, November 4th, the day before Election Day. Though really voting has been going on for several weeks and many millions of Americans have already voted in the election. If that's you, thanks for voting. Just about a day left to remind your friends and family to turn out and vote and why it matters in this election, which is what this post and this video are really all about. So first of all, we want to go back and remind folks the reason why we describe ourselves as an anti-fascist climate group and why we focus on Donald Trump as the leader of a fossil-fueled fascist movement in the United States. One, I think the fascist label is pretty well covered at this point. Most people get why we talk about Donald Trump in those terms and what we mean by it. But the fossil-fueled fascist movement is bigger than just Trump. It includes his whole sort of MAGA movement in the United States, the Republican Party being the standard bearers there, as well as international movements like Putin's government in Russia and their war in Ukraine, Netanyahu's government in Israel and their war on Gaza and other parts of Palestine now. And so what connects all these things together is a close relationship between the fossil fuel industry and fascist militarist movements around the globe, including but not limited to Trump. And so that's why we've been talking about this, why we've been warning about Trump since before the 2021 insurrection on January 6, 2021. But certainly after that, we have been an active participant in movements to try and get Trump banned from the ballot. That was unsuccessful thanks to the Supreme Court's intervention. Also to prosecute Trump and other members of his fossil-fueled fascist party for crimes related to the insurrection. Those were mostly unsuccessful due to the Supreme Court again. But it's also why we brought you news and information from groups like Razom We Stand in Ukraine, which specifically connects the dots between the fossil fuel industry, Russia, and the war in Ukraine, and is calling for a just, peaceful rebuilding plan that focuses on renewable energy in that country. It's why we brought you campaigns like the Boycott Chevron campaign, which focuses on Israel's close connection with the Chevron Corporation and their ownership over contested gas fields off the coast of occupied Gaza. And other issues like that. And it's why we'll continue to launch new campaigns with our friends at Beyond Extreme Energy and others, calling out the links between fossil fuels, fascism, and militarism globally. But it's the day before Election Day, and the point of this post was to try and give people some tools and information to make the period of waiting for the polls to close, waiting for election results to come in less stressful, and to give you some useful things you can do over the next couple of days as part of the anti-fascist climate movement. The first thing that you can do, it's not too late to still go vote. There are a number of states, more than half of all states in the country allow some form of election day voter registration, which means even if you haven't registered to vote yet, let alone cast a ballot yet, you can go down to your polling place in a number of states and register to vote and vote all on one day tomorrow, November 5th, because that is election day here in the US. If you're interested in doing that, there's some great tools in the blog post where you can get help finding your polling place, looking up who's on your ballot, what their positions on climate change are. It's not just the presidential election this year. There's a lot of folks running for office all over the United States for a lot of different offices that will have a lot to do with how our electric utilities are run and whether or not our state legislatures support climate action and things like that. So check out all the tools on the website to find your polling place, get registered to vote, even if you haven't yet already, and go vote. And if you've already voted or if you already have a plan to vote, reach out to people you know, friends and family, bring them to the polls with you, remind everybody to vote, because that is still the best way to influence the outcome of the election, is to participate in it. That's also the best way to build confidence in the election results, which we'll talk more about in a minute, the process of ballot counting. So go vote if you haven't already, and use the tools in this post and on this page to do that if you want. Next thing is on election night, tomorrow night after the polls close, it will probably take a couple of hours at least for most of the major news networks and independent experts to call the election result. That's because we're expecting a record number of people to vote in the election this year in 2024. We've already seen very high turnout, similar to or above, in some cases, turnout in some states compared to the 2020 election. And that's just people voting early or by mail. We're also expecting many millions of people to cast ballots tomorrow, and it will take time to count all of those ballots. One of the things that happens in modern American elections is that because Republicans tend to be more concentrated in rural districts with fewer total voters, and Democrats tend to be concentrated in urban areas where you have more voters per square mile, more ballots per precinct, it will take longer to count up all the ballots from Democratic-leaning precincts than it does from Republican-leaning precincts. And this creates a phenomenon that's called the red mirage on election night, which basically is right after the polls close in a number of states on the East Coast and also in the Midwest. We will expect to see that early totals show Donald Trump and other Republican fossil fuel fascist candidates ahead in the early counting of ballots. As the night goes on and all the ballots are counted, and it may take up to a couple days or even a couple of weeks in some states and precincts to count all the ballots, as they do that, we would expect to see the gap narrow or even Democrats overtake Republicans in each of those elections, including in the race for president. So the red mirage is this phenomenon whereby it looks like Donald Trump is leading in the polls early in the night or in the election counting early in the night. But as the evening goes on and as we get into Wednesday morning and Thursday, as all the ballots are counted, that the totals will reverse and that Donald Trump will fall behind, or that certainly Kamala Harris and other Democrats would catch up in the counting. In 2020, Donald Trump took advantage of the red mirage to claim that he had won the election early in the evening, before all the ballots were counted and before some polling places had just barely closed out west and in Alaska. And we would expect him to probably do that again. It was a centerpiece of his big lie strategy to overturn the election results in 2020, that he claimed that the red mirage was sudden or surprising or unexpected, when in fact most political scientists had expected to see exactly that kind of result and outcome, and used that to allege that there was election interference or illegal voting happening in some of the states. You may remember all this talk about ballot dumps. That's a reference to ballots that were counted after the polls closed late on Tuesday night into Wednesday morning and the day after the election in 2020. And we'll expect to see the same kind of stuff from Donald Trump again. The best way to fend off that particular piece of misinformation is just to know that it's coming and know that it's not true. As more ballots are counted, we will get updated totals. Look for nonpartisan independent folks like the Associated Press and various newspapers. When they're willing to call an election, that means they think enough votes have been counted and that there's enough difference between the candidates that they won't be able to reverse it, even if all the ballots left to be counted went in one candidate's favor or the other. It wouldn't change the outcome as they're seeing it. That's why they usually wait until there's like 70, 80, 90% of the ballots counted, especially in a close state. And again, in a big state like Pennsylvania, for example, or Georgia or Michigan, a lot of the swing states, there are a lot of people who are going to be voting. A lot of them will be voting tomorrow, and it will take time to count all those votes. In addition, some states like Pennsylvania don't allow what's called pre-processing of ballots, so they can't open the envelopes on mail-in ballots until tomorrow when election day is happening and they're counting other votes. And that means that process just takes longer. And again, because Democrats tend to vote by mail more often than Republicans do, so a little bit less of that this year, that can lead to more of the red mirage, looking like Republicans are ahead when you're only counting people who voted in person on election day. And you're counting first the precincts that are quicker to total up, meaning those more rural precincts. Okay, last thing, if it's a blowout election for either party, if either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris wins in a landslide, this next part of information probably won't apply so much. But if it's not a landslide, if it is close, as polls suggest, and we get into what's called a contested election result, what you'll expect to see is somewhere between November 6th and 7th and between December 8th or so, a flurry of challenges and lawsuits. Again, this is familiar for all of us who are around for 2020 and the election there. That's what happened. Donald Trump claimed he'd won victory on election night while they were still counting ballots, and then filed a bunch of lawsuits to try and stop them from counting ballots. This is also familiar if you're a little bit older climate activists. You may remember the 2000 election, Gore versus Bush, George W. Bush. And in that particular election, they were still trying to count the ballots in Florida in particular. They hadn't called the election winner because it was very close, just a couple thousand votes separating the two candidates. And the Supreme Court stepped in and ordered them to stop counting ballots at a point where George Bush, was ahead in the polls. Subsequent analyses have shown we'll never really know because we can't go back and redo the whole election, but it's possible if they had done a full recount or a full audit of all the ballots cast in 2000 that Al Gore actually would have won for Florida, but we'll never know because the Supreme Court that year put a stop to the ballot counting before the state officials were done with it. So the same kind of outcome could be possible in 2024. That's what we're on watch for. And we're announcing tonight that we'll have a briefing call in the evening at 8 o'clock Eastern. That's 5 o'clock Pacific time on Thursday, November 7th. And you can join us there if you want to get an update on lawsuits and ballot counting at that point. That's around the time when we'll expect, if it is close, if it is contested, Donald Trump will start filing a lot of lawsuits, or Kamala Harris might start filing a lot of lawsuits if she feels like there's election fraud. But more likely, we're likely to see that from Donald Trump if it's a close election. If it's not a blowout in either candidate's favor, then Donald Trump has already shown he's willing to file those kind of lawsuits and that he's not too concerned about the particulars. A lot of his 2020 election lawsuits were thrown out as meritless or not having any evidence behind them. But for Donald Trump, it will probably be enough to just get the lawsuits filed with the hope of appealing to the Supreme Court and slowing or stopping either the counting of ballots in individual states and precincts, or later the certification of the election by the Electoral College. And that's where the Electoral College electors meet in December. The key date to have in your mind is December 11th, which is the safe harbor deadline. That's the deadline by which states have to report the total number of votes in their state, and that determines who the Electoral College members are supposed to be. If Donald Trump wins a state, he gets the Electoral College votes from that state, and that decision is supposed to be made on or by December 11th. And so we're looking for lawsuits between early November and early December that would try and influence either the counting of ballots or the appointing of individual Electoral College slates from the states. So that's what we'll be looking for. Join us on Thursday evening if you want to find out more about where we're at in that process and what's going on. And read through the whole blog post if you want more details and links to lots and lots of news articles, constitutional scholars, and other information about how the whole electoral process works. Okay, happy election day almost. Get out there and vote if you haven't already. And from 198 Methods, I'm Drew.